Hi, everyone. My name is Anthony Ruggiano, and in 1988, I was struggling with addiction, and I went into a treatment center. I set up a helpline number, which is 855-963-2113. That's 855-963-2113. That number, phones will be manned 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So if you're struggling with addiction, or you know someone that is struggling with addiction, please call that number and let me help. I will be hands-on. I will be personally involved in the person's recovery. They will meet me. They will spend time with me, and I will help them live a life beyond their wildest dreams. Hello, everyone. My name is Anthony Ruggiano Jr., and I want to welcome everybody to Reform Gangsters. And if you enjoy my content, please hit the like button and subscribe and ring the bell. Also, if you support what I'm doing, become a member of reformgangsters.com, get early access to all my content, be part of the show, and get to ask your Mafia history questions. Also, on March 12th, I'll be in the studio in Long Island. If you want to be a guest at the studio and watch the taping of my show, the content's going to be on Behind the Gangster. It's a new script and movie that's in the process of being made. So please come on down. Send me an email to my email, AnthonyRuggianojr@gmail.com for an invite, and we'll let you know where the location is and what time to show up. And in this week's Get to Know My Viewers poll, I'm just going to go over the poll that I received right before the Super Bowl started, which is now over. As we all know, Kansas City won 38-35. But unfortunately, the poll, I had 462 people vote, and it was 56% for the Eagles. So if I go by this poll, I'm assuming the bookmakers had a good day that day. It's funny because, I look at the poll and it said, 32% of the people wanted to watch the game, 13% were interested in what food was going to be served, 6% were interested in the commercials, and 3% in the halftime show. Me personally, I don't really like Super Bowl parties because a lot of people aren't there to watch the game. I like to watch the game. I like to make a little wager, so I'm really not big on Super Bowl parties. I actually watched the game home alone with my daughter. That was the poll. So I'm assuming the bookmakers made a lot of money because I just read an article that as far as the sports books in Vegas or the sports books throughout the country now, like MGM Sportsbook, which is a big sports book now throughout the country, because now it's legal. They stole it from the mob. See, I went to jail over Super Bowl Sunday, but now it's legal. So anyway, the sports book, they said they took in the most money in the history of the sports book on the Super Bowl. So they must have made a lot of money. I know Drake, the singer Drake, bet $700,000 on Kansas City. God bless him. I read that article. Imagine that, having that kind of money to bet $700,000 on a football game. I'm getting a lot of questions. It's funny because I'm looking at my little script I got here, and one of the questions is, did you know Greg DePalma from the Westchester Premier Theater? And I try to think of content and try to think of people to talk about that. I like to talk about people that I know personally. I mean, I could talk about people that I don't know personally because I do know a lot of stories through my father and other people. But me personally, I like to keep it on people that I know personally, that I had some sort of relationship with, or knew them, or met them, or ran across them. Had some kind of human contact with them. And one of the questions is, did you know Greg DePalma? And I was thinking of doing a show on him and his son Greg Jr., who I knew really well, who I was in Schuylkill federal prison with. The son, Greg DePalma Jr., who was a made member of the Gambino family, he tried to commit suicide and he hung himself, and it was unsuccessful, but he cut off the oxygen to his brain, and he was a vegetable for years before he passed away. And that's a story within itself because, Greg DePalma, the father, was a big money guy. He was he was very tight with Castellano. He was very tight with Frank Sinatra. Really, that's why Sinatra used to do the Westchester Premier Theater. I mean, Sinatra got called in front of Congress over that because it was a big mob swindle, a big big bust out joint, the Westchester Premier Theater. And I think Sinatra actually opened up the place. He was the first entertainer to appear there. So Greg DePalma Sr. was really close to him. He was very close with John Gotti. He got his son straightened out, Greg, who he had no business getting straightened out. The kid was he wasn't a criminal. He wasn't a gangster. He was just a kid, whose father was a wise guy, like me. But different. The difference between me and Greg DePalma is, I was in the street. I went, I worked, crap games and poker games. And, I went to gin and out of jail. His son didn't do any of that. He was just a nice kid. He was a big Led Zeppelin fan. He had a lot of memorabilia. And when he got made, they put him with John Jr., Greg DePalma Jr. The father had him positioned in John Jr.'s crew, and he got arrested with Mikey Scars and John Jr. and all of them on that case with Scores. They all got arrested for Scores for all them strip joints and extortion, and the kid went to jail. And when he was in Atlanta, because they had a strip joint in Atlanta, they all got indicted over him and Mikey Scars and John Jr. He profited. He thought he was doing the right thing, and he didn't discuss it with anybody, and he profited. And then they sort of put a wire on him that, he cooperated, and the kid, hung himself. I mean, it's another mob tragic story. So, that's my thing on Greg DePalma. I'll get into it more at a later date. We'll try to do Reformed Gangster on them. There's more to the story than that. Another question was, did I have a relationship with Ali Shades? Ali Shades owned Pastels. I spent many nights in Pastels with John Gotti. He was a captain in the Genovese family. He was very well known, very well respected, had a lot of money, big continental player, big gambler, used to play continental with John Gotti for tens of thousands of dollars, very sharp guy. Ali Shades, I used to see him all the time in Pastels. Like I said, he was the owner. And so I mean, he knew who I was. I knew who he was. We had a couple of conversations. I wouldn't say we were buddy. I used to see him at the Continental game and, and all that. So, yeah, he was around a while. Another question was, did I have a relationship with Mikey Scars? I knew Mikey Scars. I still know Mikey Scars. He's a good guy. He's a friend of mine. I didn't have any kind of connection with him in the street. We knew each other. We saw each other at the Ravenite all the time on 101st Avenue. In Pastels, he was there a few times with us. I used to go to, he used to give me a lot of Yankee tickets, him and John Jr. The three of us were big Yankee fans. Mikey Scars is a really big Yankee fan. He used to give me tickets to take my son to the Yankee game. So, yeah, I know he was straightened out on Christmas Eve night with John Jr. and Skinny Dom Pizzoni. They all got made the same night. I was waiting for them to come back to Richie Gotti's club. He didn't come back, Mikey. I don't know where he went after the ceremony, but John Jr. and Skinny Dom came back to Richie Gotti's club right after the ceremony. On Christmas Eve, I was waiting there for them to congratulate them with Tony Lee. So, yeah, I have a relationship with Mikey Scars. And then the next question is if I would ever do a segment on my dear friend Tony Roach, I would definitely do that. I have some really good stories about Tony Roach. Him and I had a really great experience together with this good wise guy with the chin called Dom DeSailor. We had pretty much had a fist fight with him, and it was a big sit down in Manhattan over it. So, yeah, that'd be a good show. That'd be a good segment. And, I'll talk more about Tony Roach at a later date. So now let's get to the main segment of the show. So the main segment of tonight's show is something that, I try to watch other people's podcasts that are on the same genre as mine, just to see what they're up to, what they're doing, what they're talking about. And lately, the past couple of weeks, I've been hearing these two names mentioned by a couple of guys. One name is Johnny Irish, who was a captain in the Colombo family, and another guy's name was Jimmy Knapp, who was a captain in the Genovese family. And like I said earlier, I try to talk about people that I know or people I did business with or people I had encounters with. And these are two names and two wise guys that I actually did have relationships with, of course, through my father. I met them both, and first I'll talk a little bit about Johnny Irish. For those of you who don't know who that is, he was a captain in the Colombo family. He originally started out as Sonny Francise's driver when he was a young fella. He was, he did a couple of mob hits. He was a killer. He was a tough guy. He was very, very close with Sonny Francis, who was very close with my father. So Johnny Irish and my father knew each other very well. you know, he was a thief. He was a stick-up guy. He had a lot of balls. You know, later on in life, they robbed this place in Miami called the Harbor Island Spa. And it's funny because I lived right across the street from there. My father always used to tell me that's the place Johnny Irish robbed. They got like $2 million in jewelry. They broke into all the safety deposit boxes. It was a high-end spa back in the 60s and 70s where all the rich people used to go when they used to go down to Miami. And he did a couple of years for that. I mean, he got arrested for that. He went to prison for that. When he got out, he pretty much was the Colombo guy in South Florida. Carmine Persico made him a captain. You know, he had a crew down there. And what happened was how I got to meet him and got involved with them is my father started going back and forth to Florida. He started getting a lot of trouble in New York with subpoenas and everything out in Suffolk County. So he went to Florida, and Johnny Irish owned a restaurant in Florida with this woman named Josephine, and Larry Abendando, who was the Dash's son, who was in Murder Incorporated. They used to call him Larry Bacala. He was friends with Josephine, and he took my father to the restaurant because they knew Johnny Irish owned it with this woman. And my father actually started dating her. My father actually moved in with her. My father had a big relationship with her because my father was separated at the time from my mother. But so Johnny Irish would be in there, and pretty much my father was with Johnny Irish almost every night in Florida. You know, and whenever I was in Miami, I was with them. Johnny Irish, Larry, Junior Bacala, you know, Johnny Irish's crew. This guy Bear and a couple of other guys, Billy Baird from Boston. He had a whole bunch of guys around. Ali Boy's son-in-law, Farisi. He was around them, and they had another club called Downstairs Upstairs that was on Biscayne Boulevard. This guy, Anthony Black, I believe his name. He was a bookmaker. He was a wise guy. He was in Johnny Irish's crew. He was always there. You know, I would go to that club all the time with my father, Downstairs Upstairs. You know, and pretty much all we did with Johnny Irish was we partied with him. You know, we drank, we ate, you know. And but the only thing is, you know, they were moving a lot of coke back then. You know, this was 80, 81, 82, you know. It was you know, it was the roaring 20s down in Miami, you know what I mean? Like the cocaine was flowing, you know, you had the Colombians. This is way before the Mexican cartel got involved. You had the Colombians and the Cubans that, you know, that you had, you know, there were just tons of coke down here, and everybody was getting high and selling coke and all that. It was kind of crazy. And, you know, I remember many, many nights sitting in restaurants and in bars with my father and Johnny Irish and a couple of other guys. And I remember us at this long table. And I remember one night, especially, I remember I was sitting, Johnny Irish was sitting at the head of the table, and my father was sitting next to him, and I was sitting next to my father, but, you know, I could hear, you know, I was part of the conversation. And I remember my father, because my father liked Johnny Irish. He really liked him. They were really good friends. And I remember my father telling him one night, listen, man, you got to pull the reins in with your guys, with, you know, with the drugs and everything, because they were all getting high. They were selling drugs. I mean, you know, they were like cowboys. It was like the Wild West down here. And because if that guy in New York, which he meant Carmine Persico, finds out what's going down there, you're going to have an issue. You got to pull the reins in with these guys and with yourself. You know, you can't keep doing this blatantly out in the open. And he was the type, you know, he was like a, you know, F that, you know, he had a lot of balls, Johnny Irish, but, you know, you're a captain now. My father was trying to school him. Listen, you're a captain now. You can't behave this way. You know, you got to, you know, be more, you know, humble, more, you know, like low key. You know, you got to pull the reins in. Needless to say, Johnny Irish disappeared off the face of the earth. You know what I mean? So, like, we all know what happened to Johnny Irish. You know what I mean? Like, he was sent for him and he never came back. And, you know, and what happened was this other guy, Anthony Black, I'm almost positive that was his name, Anthony Black. He was, like I said, he was a wise guy in Johnny Irish's crew in Florida. He was like Johnny Irish's main guy. You know, my father had a house on Ice Dairy Road in Miami. And, you know, after Johnny Irish disappeared, this guy came to my father's house, Anthony, you know, and he rang the bell, and like he came in and, you know, and he told my father, like, listen, they sent for me. I got to go to New York. You know, what do you think I should do? And, you know, my father looked at him. My father goes, listen, I can't tell you what to do to go up there and get killed. He goes, I can't tell you what to do. He says, you got to make up your own mind. So Anthony asked my father, well, if you were me, what would you do? And my father said, I would go. He says, you can't fight an army. You know, I would go and I would go, you know, and he went. I give the guy credit. You know, he went, he came back to talk, to live, to fight another day. You know, he went up there, whatever they did, they would, and he came back to Florida and he took over. He was running the show for them down there. After that, he was a good earner. You know, he was a big bookmaker. This guy, he had a lot of money. He was running the clubs. He ran downstairs, upstairs for them. You know, he was, you know, it was a good business decision keeping him around. You know what I mean? So, you know, so, and poor Johnny Irish, he disappeared. And, you know, my father told me one night, you know, yeah, he goes, that's why I don't sell drugs. He goes, because now the word is, you see, we kill captains that sell drugs. You know, I'm not saying that's the reason why Johnny Irish disappeared, but I'm sure that was a reason that was used to get rid of Johnny Irish. I always had good times with him. He was a funny guy. You know, he was a drinker. He was a partier. You know, he owned this restaurant. He owned this restaurant, like I said, with this woman, Josephine. And my father wanted to open up a restaurant with her. And I don't know, Johnny Irish really didn't want to do it. He let her go, like release her. And I don't know what happened, but one night, Johnny Irish's restaurant caught on fire. And then you know, I don't know, you know, I always used to say my father burnt his restaurant down, but he didn't put a beef in Johnny Irish. I guess, I don't know, maybe he let it go. But to this day, I still believe my father had the fire, said it was a kitchen fire. You know, it was, or just a really big coincidence that, you know, the restaurant burnt down and Josephine and my father opened up a restaurant called Dano's right across the street from the Harbor Island Spa. And that's another story for another day, that restaurant my father opened, you walked in there one night and the boss of Buffalo was in there, Joe Tadera, Sam the plumber was in there, the boss of Jersey. It was crazy. You walked in there was bosses in there, captains, that it was so mobbed up, and so the whole clientele that one night the FBI walked in and just took the friggin' liquor license right off the wall. It was crazy. My father loved it. He would just run around with a drink in his hand, go from table to table. He thought he was a maitre d'. Johnny Irish never got to, I think Johnny Irish was in there a couple of times when we first opened it, but he was a nice guy, Johnny Irish. He was dangerous. And, you know, and Carmine was a little more dangerous, his boss, and he went. As far as Jimmy Knapp's concerned, you know, my relationship with Jimmy Knapp was strictly business. You know, he was a big gambling czar, you know, big banker, bookmaker, big number bank, big. One of the biggest number banks in New York City. You know, this guy, Arnie Sherman was his main guy. I was good friends with his son, Matty Sherman. You know, Arnie was one of his, with Jimmy Knapp's main guy. He lived in my neighborhood, Arnie, on right off 101st Avenue in Ozone Park. So I knew Jimmy Knapp well. We turned in our numbers to him for many years. He was our banker, my father's banker. We were the controllers. He was the banker. He had a lot of money, a lot of power, and a lot of money. He was really big in the policy business before the lottery. Like, he was one of the biggest ever. And he was a captain with the Genovese families, but nice guy, very sharp guy, very intelligent, big money maker. And that's my relationship with Jimmy Knapp, you know, strictly business, you know, not like Johnny Irish was more friend, you know, more hanging out, you know, partying, you know, all that stuff. I never did any business with Johnny Irish. Oh yeah, I did. Getting back to Johnny Irish, it's funny how things go around in a circle. So now Johnny Irish disappears. Anthony, I don't know whatever happened to him, black. Now it's 1990s. My father's in prison and I'm in Florida, and I run into Nicky Carrazza, who's a captain in the Gambino family, and Lenny, his partner, guys my father made, straightened out. They meet, they find me one day by the Fontainebleau. We start hanging out in Florida together. And one day Nicky tells me, listen, I gotta go to New York. I got an emergency, but I got an appointment tonight with Johnny Irish's old crew at the strip joint, Goldfingers. Do you know them? I said, of course I know them. I used to hang out with all of them. I know them. I mean, I haven't seen them since 1984. This is like 10 years later. I says, but I know them. He goes, you think you could go there tonight and take care of it? So this guy around Nicky owed them, a guy around them owed Nicky had a guy down here, Shylock down here, that a guy around them owed Nicky's guy money. And he asked me if I could go there and make a deal for this guy to pay Nicky's guy back. So I, of course, thinking now I should have said no. I said, yeah, of course. I'll, no problem. I'll take care of it for you. So me and this kid, Robert Angle, went up there. And, now you got to understand, when I was running around with them 10 years ago, I was, partying. I was drinking, snorting coke. I was skinny. Now 10 years later, I'm healthy. I'm making a ton of money. I'm looking good. You know what I mean? I'm dressing good. I'm looking good. And, I mean, I still look the same, but I look different. I look much better, I would say. And so I walk into the strip club and, and this guy, Billy Baird's there. He's a guy from Boston. He was with them. And he says, I said, listen, Nicky sent us, he can't make it. So he sent me. So the guy's like giving me the eyeball, right? So he doesn't say nothing to me. He goes, okay, you got to wait a little while, right? So I'm sitting there, I'm waiting. I order a club soda. I'm sitting in the strip joint. I'm waiting. Then he tells me, right, come on, come in the back room. So I walk in the back room and there's like 6 guys back there, but I knew like 4 of them, they were all Johnny Irish's old crew. So I recognized them right away, but for some reason, they like didn't really recognize me at first. So they sort of like started, because they were like bad fucking people. I mean, they were dangerous. They sort of like making a circle around me, and I'm standing there, I'm looking at them, I'm going, these guys, in my head, I'm going, these guys don't even recognize me. They're looking to like go to work on me. They're like sort of like making a circle around me, right? So I'm looking at them and I go like, I go, oh, what are you doing? So they're looking at me. They go, Nicky sent you? I said, yeah, you don't recognize me? I said, it's me, Anthony, Fat Andy's son. Oh my God. They like flipped. Oh, they started hugging me and kissed. Oh my God, was so, how's your father? Kissing me, hugging me. And P.S. I made a deal for the guy to get his money back, and I got indicted and got 10 years. To make a long story short, and I got thrown into a federal RICO case because of that meeting, and I got indicted and I went to jail and I got 10 years for it because I did a favor for somebody. So Johnny Irish's crew, I went full circle with Johnny Irish's crew. That's my 2 stories about Johnny Irish and Jimmy Knapp. So I want to thank everybody for watching Reformed Gangsters tonight. And please, if you need help with addiction, or you know anybody else that needs help with addiction, please don't hesitate to call my helpline at 855-963-2113. And please only call that number if you need help. That's not a number to talk to me with. It'll be a pleasure to talk to you, but please contact me through my website, AnthonyRuggianojr at gmail.com, or Reform Gangsters. Send us a message. My team will get back to me and we'll arrange some kind of talk. But please only call that number if you need help with addiction. Thank you.